August 1943, Camp Crossville, Tennessee. Unteroffizier Werner Burkhardt stepped off the train into sunlight and stopped breathing. Electric lights, everywhere. Every building, every street corner, every shop window, blazing in broad daylight. Not strategic lighting, not military necessity. Waste, magnificent, incomprehensible waste. In Germany, blackout regulations had plunged the Reich into darkness since 1940. Violators were arrested, repeat violators were shot. Even before the war, rural electrification reached barely 20% of farms. Here, a train station in rural Tennessee had more lights than Hamburg. Think about that. A town Burkhardt couldn't locate on a map outshone Germany's second-largest city. His sergeant muttered the standard explanation: propaganda. The Americans staging displays to make prisoners think they were stronger. But as guards led 1,250 Afrika Korps veterans through Crossville, Burkhardt counted compulsively. Every building lit, every home electrified, power lines everywhere. The cost of electrifying rural Tennessee exceeded Germany's entire infrastructure budget, and Tennessee was one of 48 states. Meanwhile in Hamburg, Burkhardt's mother read by candlelight. His sister worked munitions factory night shifts in darkness. His father's machine shop had been without power for 3 weeks. Meanwhile in Crossville, train station lights burned at noon because turning them off required more effort than leaving them on. What Burkhardt didn't know was that America generated 50 million kilowatts, Germany generated 20 million.
America produced twice the electricity while fighting 2 oceans than Germany produced at peacetime capacity. What he didn't know was that rural electrification had been federal policy. The government spent billions running power to farms because Americans believed electricity was a right. What he didn't know was that Crossville's casual abundance, population 3,400, was considered normal, unremarkable, the basic minimum. What he didn't know was that he was about to undergo the most profound psychological transformation in POW history, not through re-education, not through propaganda, through corn, through 3 meals daily, through farmers who treated enemies like neighbors, through wages that bought real things, through the simple, devastating discovery that the society he'd been taught to despise operated on principles of abundance that made Nazi promises look like poverty. Within 6 months, he'd be writing letters describing America as paradise. Within a year, he'd request permission to stay. Within 2 years, he'd cry when forced to return to a Germany that seemed like prison after tasting freedom. The transformation wouldn't happen through force. It would happen through treating prisoners better than Germany treated its own citizens. May 1943. The war ended for Obergefreiter Hans Müller on May 13, 1943, through arithmetic. His unit, the 21st Panzer Division, had run out of ammunition 3 days earlier, food 2 days earlier. Water that morning. When British tanks appeared, Müller and 127 soldiers raised hands, too exhausted for shame, too hungry for honor, too thirsty for dignity. The British gave them water first, before interrogation, before processing, just water, then food. K rations, American field rations, each containing crackers, cheese, candy, fruit bar, instant coffee, sugar, cigarettes. Müller consumed his ration in 4 minutes, more food than he'd seen in a week. The chocolate made him dizzy, real chocolate with real sugar, not the ersatz substitute. Beside him, Gefreiter Schmidt was crying, not from defeat, from chocolate, from tasting something he'd forgotten existed. His company commander asked the British sergeant, "This is standard ration?" The sergeant's response shocked them. This is what Americans complain about.
They call K rations the worst food in their military. The Germans stared. What one side considered barely adequate, the other considered impossible abundance. Over 2 weeks, 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrendered in Tunisia. Processing camps in Oran filled with men who expected death and received 3 hot meals daily. Real meat daily, fresh bread, coffee with real sugar. Meanwhile in Hamburg, Müller's mother traded her wedding ring for 2 pounds of butter. His sister worked 12-hour shifts for wages that couldn't buy adequate food. His brother stole bread from Wehrmacht depots. Meanwhile, in Oran, American logistics fed 250,000 prisoners 3 hot meals daily, without strain. The sergeant insisted conditions would deteriorate after interrogation. Conditions changed. They improved. In July, Müller boarded the SS James Madison, a Liberty ship built 4 months earlier. The Atlantic crossing took 2 weeks. Mess hall served hot food twice daily, real coffee with every meal, fresh bread baked daily, more food than Müller had eaten as a soldier fighting for the Reich. On the 8th day, crew served ice cream, in the middle of the Atlantic, on a cargo ship, to prisoners, not special occasion, not propaganda, standard provision. Müller held his portion and stared. He hadn't tasted ice cream since 1939. Most German children had never tasted it. Ice cream had disappeared in 1941 when sugar became scarce. And here, on a cargo ship, Americans served it to prisoners. The sailor noticed his expression. First time in a while. Müller nodded, speechless. The sailor's response, "Enjoy it. Once you get stateside, you'll get sick of it. We've got ice cream everywhere. Sick of ice cream." The phrase didn't translate. You couldn't tire of luxury that didn't exist in your world. 3 decks below, Feldwebel Otto Krebs was calculating. 3,000 servings, 4 ounces each, 750 pounds of ice cream, which required cream, sugar, flavoring, and impossibly, refrigeration on a cargo ship burning fuel to generate electricity, to freeze cream, to serve as dessert to prisoners while crossing an ocean during war. The waste was magnificent, the abundance was crushing, the implications were inescapable. In forward hold, Gefreiter Paul Hartmann watched American sailors serve ice cream without taking any themselves. They didn't want it. Ice cream was so common they could serve 3,000 prisoners and not want any themselves. Meanwhile in Hamburg, Hartmann's sister boiled potato peels for soup. His mother had traded silver candlesticks for butter. His brother stole bread to survive. Meanwhile, on this ship, Americans served ice cream to enemies and were indifferent because abundance had made luxury boring. What Hartmann didn't know was that ice cream production had increased during war, not decreased. That this single service represented more dairy and sugar than his entire Hamburg neighborhood would see in 6 months. What he didn't know was that he held proof Germany had already lost, not through military defeat, through mathematical impossibility. You couldn't fight a society that served ice cream to prisoners while your citizens boiled potato peels. When ship docked at Norfolk, prisoners stared. The port stretched miles, dozens of ships loading simultaneously. Cranes moving cargo with electric power, warehouses the size of German towns, and everywhere lights, burning in daylight, wasting power because turning them off was more trouble. The trains weren't cattle cars, passenger coaches with padded seats, dining cars, bathrooms that worked. As they rolled through Virginia, Burkhardt watched America pass. Farms everywhere. Every farm electrified. Everything on a scale that made German agriculture look like gardens. His sergeant insisted staged, showing us their best areas, but you couldn't fake hundreds of miles of farmland. This was real. America was exactly as abundant as it appeared. August 1943. Camp Crossville sat on 700 acres purchased specifically for housing prisoners. 700 acres for one camp for 3,000 men. Germany's entire POW system used less land, built in 4 months. Barracks, mess halls, hospital, administration, guard towers, fencing.
all constructed faster than German crews repaired damaged buildings. When Müller arrived, his barrack was new. Wood smelled fresh, electric lights in every room, multiple lights with switches that worked, hot water always available, flush toilets connected to sewers, steam heat already installed for winter, though it was August. Each barrack used more lumber than entire German villages possessed. The hospital made revelation complete. Oberarzt Dr. Friedrich Bauer had operated in field hospitals across North Africa,
performing amputations without anesthetic, watching soldiers die from infections antibiotics could cure. Now he stood in a POW camp hospital and couldn't speak. X-ray machines, 2 of them, surgical equipment complete and sterilized, pharmaceutical cabinets full. Bauer told Müller during intake exam, holding up a vial, "They have penicillin. This miracle drug German scientists discovered, but German factories couldn't manufacture. Americans produce it freely, use it on prisoners with infected cuts. Not because infection is life-threatening, because they can. German soldiers died from infections penicillin could cure, while Americans gave it to enemy prisoners with infected hangnails." The camp kitchen completed demolition. Krebs, assigned to kitchen duty, entered and stopped. Just stopped. Walk-in refrigerators, plural. Electric mixers handling dough by pushing buttons, automated dishwashers, gas ranges with multiple burners. The equipment exceeded Munich's finest hotels, but equipment was nothing compared to food. Daily ration per prisoner, fresh milk, 1 pint, eggs daily, meat, 12 ounces per day, not per week, per day, vegetables fresh or canned, white bread baked daily, Krebs calculated compulsively, 3,000 prisoners, 1 pint milk each, 375 gallons daily, 1 egg per prisoner, 3,000 eggs daily, 12 ounces meat times 3,000, 2,250 pounds daily, every day, for prisoners, for enemies. Meanwhile in Munich, Krebs's sister traded silver for butter. His mother received 10.5 ounces of meat weekly when it existed. Meanwhile in Camp Crossville, Krebs prepared meals with fresh vegetables, real meat, white bread, and dessert. Dessert. German civilians hadn't seen dessert since 1940, but Americans required dessert for prisoners. Army regulations specified it: pie twice weekly, cake once weekly, ice cream when refrigeration permitted. On his 3rd day, Krebs was ordered to dispose of excess food. He stood at garbage bins, unable to move. He later wrote in a censored letter, "We threw away more than my family has seen in 3 years. Not spoiled food, simply excess. Regulations require preparing 10% more than needed. Surplus is discarded." The amount wasted exceeded German civilian basic rations, but real transformation began when prisoners started working outside camps. September 1943. By September, America faced critical labor shortage. 17 million men mobilized for military service. Agriculture still required human labor. The solution: German POWs. Geneva Convention allowed non-military labor. Farmers needed workers. Prisoners needed purpose. Groups of 30 to 50 prisoners were trucked daily to farms. Each received 80 cents daily, later $1. Wages paid in camp scrip, buying Coca-Cola for 5 cents, candy bars for 5 cents, ice cream for 10 cents. A day's wages bought 20 Coca-Colas, or 16 candy bars. More disposable income than German civilians had seen in years, but wages were irrelevant compared to what prisoners encountered in fields. Müller was sent to the Johnson farm, 600 acres of corn, wheat, soybeans. When truck arrived at dawn, Sarah Johnson waited with coffee, real coffee, hot, with sugar and cream in ceramic containers. Through a translator, she explained, "Help yourselves to coffee, breakfast in an hour, work till noon, break for lunch, work till 4. Müller took coffee and stared at the sugar bowl, white sugar, refined, pure, at least 2 pounds sitting on a table for workers to use freely.
He put one spoonful in coffee. The translator noticed, "You can have more. Mrs. Johnson doesn't measure. Take what you want." Müller took another spoonful, then another. The coffee was sweet, real sweet. He hadn't tasted coffee like this in 4 years. Breakfast was eggs, fried, 2 per person, bacon, 3 strips, and toast with butter. Real butter, coffee bottomless. This was food American farmers ate. They fed workers, including enemy prisoners, the same meals they fed themselves. Müller worked alongside 2 farmhands.
Jack Peterson White, James Cooper Black, both earned $1 daily plus meals, same wages prisoners received. That equality was revolutionary. At lunch under an oak, James Cooper asked through translator, "You know why you're fighting this war?" Müller struggled to answer. Liberation, Lebensraum. The answers that made sense in 1939 sounded hollow in 1943. Cooper continued, "My brothers in the 92nd Infantry fighting your country, all Negro division because they won't let us fight alongside whites, can't eat in same restaurants, can't use same bathrooms, but he's fighting for freedom. You see the contradiction?" Müller did. America had racial problems, segregation, discrimination. But Cooper, despite discrimination, ate better than German aristocracy, owned a car, had electric lights, could change jobs, could move states without permission. Freedom and abundance weren't equality, but they were better than what Germany offered even preferred citizens. On the Weber farm in October, Müller witnessed mechanical corn harvesting. The machine, John Deere combine harvester, was enormous, moving through cornfields, consuming rows, 1 machine, 1 operator, work of 100 men. The machine harvested 60 acres daily. What would have taken 100 men a week, this machine did in 1 day. Weber explained through translator, "This combine cost $3,000, most expensive thing I own except land, but pays for itself in 3 seasons. Can harvest entire crop in 2 weeks with this and 2 hands. Used to take 30 men 6 weeks, $3,000, 30,000 Reichsmarks, more than German farmers earned in 5 years. Müller asked, "You grow corn for food?" Weber laughed. "Some for food, most for livestock feed. Grow so much we feed it to animals. Some years government pays us not to grow corn because there's too much. Growing food to feed animals because of surplus was incomprehensible. In Germany, every calorie was precious. Here, abundance created luxury of waste. Corn fed to pigs because there was more than humans needed. Government paid farmers not to grow crops because overproduction was America's problem, not scarcity, overproduction." Meanwhile, in Germany, Müller's family ate bread mixed with sawdust. His mother had traded her wedding ring for butter. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, farmers were paid not to grow food because they could grow too much. The mathematics were inescapable. This wasn't military strength defeating military weakness. This was civilizational capacity defeating civilizational inadequacy. By November, prisoners were writing letters censored but preserved. "Americans feed us better than we fed ourselves as free soldiers. They pay wages, treat us like human beings. I don't understand why we were told they were enemies." Another, "Farmers have machines that do everything. So much food they throw away what we'd consider feasts. Even Negro workers drive automobiles. What were we fighting for?" Another, "American doctors saved my leg. Our field hospital would have amputated. Here, they spent hours repairing it, operated 3 times, gave me penicillin. My leg works. How do you hate people who save your leg?" Letters revealed steady erosion of Nazi ideology, not through arguments, through experience. Through demonstration that the society they'd been taught was weak actually produced better outcomes for everyone, including enemies. December 1943. Christmas 1943 delivered the most profound blow to Nazi ideology. American civilian organizations sent 500,000 Christmas packages to German POWs, 500,000 to enemies who months earlier had been killing American soldiers.
Each package contained cigarettes, candy, toiletries, games, reading materials, from churches with members fighting in Europe, from civic organizations that had lost sons, from private citizens with every reason to hate Germans. Local communities invited prisoners to Christmas dinners. Regulations prevented most from accepting.
But invitations came, church after church, family after family. At Camp Crossville, the Methodist church choir performed carols in German. Women brought homemade cookies, hundreds baked for enemy prisoners. Boy Scouts delivered handmade Christmas cards. This kindness shattered final remnants of Nazi racial theory. Oberleutnant Walter Müller wrote in his diary, "They know we're enemies. Many have sons fighting our armies, yet they show genuine Christian charity. What kind of people treat enemies this way? Only those certain of victory, only those secure in power, only those who understand strength means you can afford mercy." The Christmas feast defied comprehension. Turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, bread, pies, ice cream. Prisoners ate until sick, literally sick. Stomachs couldn't handle abundance. Men who'd been starving 6 months earlier were vomiting because they'd eaten too much. Feldwebel Hans Richter wrote, "We ate like kings, better than German generals, and this wasn't special. Guards said this was normal American Christmas dinner, every family eating the same. If they feed prisoners this way while fighting, what must their soldiers eat?" Christmas afternoon, farms invited prisoners for dessert. Müller and 15 others went to Johnson Farm. Sarah Johnson's dining room held 4 pies, 2 cakes, candy in a bowl. She told them, "Help yourselves, boys. Christmas comes but once a year." Her son's photograph smiled from the mantel. Second Lieutenant Thomas Johnson, 82nd Airborne, somewhere in Italy, probably fighting Germans at that moment. His mother was feeding enemy soldiers while her son fought their countrymen. She did it without resentment, without hatred, genuinely kind, genuinely hospitable. Müller asked through translator, "Why do you do this? Your son fights us, yet you feed us." "Why?" Sarah Johnson thought. "Because you're not fighting anymore. You're here. You're prisoners. You're boys far from home. And it's Christmas." That's reason enough. That simplicity, treating humans as humans regardless of nationality, was revolutionary to men raised in systems defining people by racial hierarchy. Nazi ideology said people were valuable based on race. American ideology, imperfectly practiced but genuinely believed, said people were valuable because they were people. Americans didn't always live up to those ideals. Müller saw discrimination, segregation, inequality. But ideals existed. The society kept trying to reach them, and the gap between American ideals and practice was smaller than between Nazi ideals and practice, because Nazi ideals required cruelty, American ideals required kindness. By New Year's Eve, something fundamental had shifted. Prisoners no longer spoke of Germany's inevitable victory. No one discussed wonder weapons. No one believed rescue was coming. Instead, they spoke of farms they wanted to return to after war, families they wanted to bring to America, starting over in a place where abundance was normal and kindness wasn't reserved for the racially pure. Schmidt admitted, "I don't want to go back. I know I have to, but I don't want to. What does Germany have for me? Rubble? Starvation? Here I work. I eat. I'm treated with respect. Why would I choose poverty over abundance?" No one had a good answer. 1945. Germany surrendered May 8, 1945. For German POWs in America, VE Day brought complicated emotions. Relief the killing stopped, grief for a homeland destroyed, anxiety about returning to devastation, and desperate reluctance to leave America. By summer 1945, over 370,000 German POWs were held in American camps. Most had worked on farms, many had been in America 2 years, Some had become essential members of farming communities. Sarah Johnson wrote her congressman, "These men saved my harvest 3 years running, worked harder than any Americans I could hire, never complained, learned English, became part of our community." Now you're sending them back to a Germany that doesn't exist. It's wrong. But regulations were clear. POWs would be repatriated. Starting summer 1945, ships began carrying prisoners back. Return voyages were silent. Men who'd arrived as enemy soldiers were leaving as Americans in everything but citizenship. Medical examinations showed German POWs returned healthier than when captured. Average weight gain 15 pounds, 90% received dental care, wounds properly healed, chronic conditions treated. They'd gained weight in captivity, received dental care, been vaccinated against diseases. They returned to families weakened by starvation. The physical contrast was undeniable proof of which system produced better outcomes. Müller stepped off ship in Bremerhaven in August 1945, weighing more than when captured.
His family looked like ghosts. They'd lost an average of 25 pounds each. His mother's teeth had rotted. His sister had permanent scars from factory accidents never treated. His brother had tuberculosis that went untreated. Many prisoners brought final Red Cross packages, chocolate, coffee, canned goods. These became family treasures. Children who'd forgotten chocolate's taste received Hershey bars from fathers who'd eaten ice cream regularly in prison camps. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Enemy prisoners had eaten better in captivity than German civilians had eaten in freedom. Müller's sister Maria held the Hershey bar and cried, "Where did you get this?" "Camp canteen. I could buy chocolate for 5 cents, bought this last week." 5 cents? 5 American cents? Yes. How much in Reichsmarks? Maybe 20 pfennigs.
Less than 1 mark. Maria held chocolate like gold. This would cost me 50 marks on black market, if I could find it. And you could buy it for 20 pfennigs every day, as many as I wanted. We got sick of chocolate. Some prisoners complained the canteen should stock different candy. Maria stared. "You got sick of chocolate, complained about having too much?" Müller understood how it sounded, obscene, grotesque. But it was true. America has so much of everything that having too much is the problem they face. The transformation had consequences extending decades beyond war. Thousands became advocates for Marshall Plan. They'd witnessed American abundance.
They'd seen prosperity through production. They'd learned the system that defeated Germany could rebuild Germany. Many eventually emigrated to America in the 1950s. Immigration restrictions loosened. Former POWs applied by thousands. Those who'd worked on farms had sponsors. Müller returned to Tennessee in 1952, brought his family, mother, sister, brother. Sarah Johnson sponsored them. Within 5 years, he'd bought 50 acres. Within 10 years, he'd built a successful farm. When Sarah died in 1975, she left him 50 additional acres. "You earned it," the will said. Others followed similar paths. Schmidt settled in Iowa farming corn. Krebs opened a restaurant in Chicago. Hartman bought an orchard in California. Weber started a machine repair business in Nebraska. They raised children who grew up American.
Who learned German only as a second language at home. Who knew their fathers had been enemy soldiers only from family stories that seemed impossibly distant. In 1967, Hans Krebs published a memoir. "In Germany, we were taught strength came from discipline, order, racial purity. We believed Germans were superior. We believed the Führer's vision would create prosperity. Instead, the Führer's vision created poverty, devastation, death. The system promising strength through discipline delivered weakness through cruelty. In America, I discovered strength came from abundance, fairness, and the simple principle that everyone deserves dignity. The society we called weak defeated us through being strong in ways we never understood. America wasn't perfect. I saw discrimination, inequality, injustice. But America produced abundance despite imperfection. Democracy worked not because Americans were better people, but because democratic principles produced better outcomes. I left Germany as a Nazi. I returned as a Democrat, not through propaganda but through potato fields, not through re-education but through 3 meals daily, not through indoctrination but through being treated like a human being. The American farmer who paid me $1 daily taught me more about politics than every Nazi speech. The food I ate as prisoner taught me more about economics than every party pamphlet. America won the war not through superior soldiers, but through superior systems. And the system that wins creates better lives for everyone, including enemies. I spent 3 years trying to return to America. When I finally succeeded, I cried from relief. Not because I hated Germany, but because I loved freedom. Not because I betrayed my country, but because I chose a better future. Many criticize me. They say I was disloyal. They say I abandoned my homeland. But I say I chose life over death, abundance over poverty, freedom over tyranny, hope over despair. And given the same choice again, I would make it again without hesitation. Because once you've tasted democracy, dictatorship tastes like ash. Once you've known abundance, scarcity seems like unnecessary cruelty. Once you've been treated like a human being, being treated like a number becomes intolerable. 3,300 calories per prisoner per day, 1,500 calories per German civilian per day. Prisoners ate more than double, but numbers alone don't tell the story. 3,300 calories meant 3 full meals. Breakfast with eggs and bacon, lunch with sandwiches and fruit, dinner with meat, vegetables, dessert. 1,500 calories meant German mothers choosing which child to feed, meant eating once daily if lucky, meant bread mixed with sawdust counted as a meal. The number that mattered was that enemy prisoners were fed better than the citizens they'd fought for, not slightly better. Twice as well. Think about what that meant when prisoners returned. Müller stepped off ship having gained 15 pounds in captivity. His mother had lost 25 pounds in freedom. 40 pounds separated them. 40 pounds of proof that everything Germany promised was lies. The master race was starving while imprisoned enemies gained weight. You couldn't argue with 40 pounds, couldn't debate the gap between a son who looked healthier after 3 years of imprisonment and a mother who looked skeletal after 3 years of freedom. The weight difference wasn't a statistic, it was a verdict written on their bodies, and it destroyed every argument about racial superiority, about German strength, about the Führer's vision. Because if the superior race was starving while the inferior democracy was fattening its enemies, then something was fundamentally, catastrophically wrong with everything Germany had believed. 0 successful permanent escapes, not 0 attempts. 2,000 tried, but 0 succeeded permanently. Not because guards were everywhere, not because fences were insurmountable, because prisoners didn't want to succeed. The ones who escaped came back voluntarily, turned themselves in, asked to be returned. Where else would they go? Back to Germany, which was rubble, into hiding in America, which had treated them fairly. 0 permanent escapes meant prisoners preferred captivity in America to freedom anywhere else. That number, 0, was more damning than any propaganda. It meant the enemy's prison camps were preferable to going home. 100,000 requests to stay. 100,000 German soldiers asking permission to remain in the country that had defeated them. 1/3 of all prisoners wanting to stay with the enemy rather than return home. Not a few dozen, not a few hundred, 100,000. That number represented complete ideological collapse. You don't have 1/3 of your captured soldiers wanting to stay with the enemy unless everything about your system has failed, unless staying with the enemy is objectively better than returning home. Germany had promised soldiers prosperity, strength, victory. Instead, it delivered starvation, weakness, defeat. And when those soldiers tasted what enemy had, abundance, fairness, dignity, 100,000 said, "We want this instead." The request to stay wasn't treason. It was rational calculation. Why choose poverty over abundance? Why choose a system that starved its people over one that fed its enemies? 100,000 requests to stay were 100,000 indictments of everything Nazi Germany represented. The story proves a principle extending beyond World War II. The way you treat those you have power over reveals the kind of society you've built. America treated enemy prisoners well, not because Americans were morally superior, but because American abundance made it possible. The system had enough that sharing with enemies didn't require taking from citizens. Germany couldn't treat prisoners well because Germany barely fed its own people. Scarcity makes cruelty rational. Abundance makes kindness practical. German POWs learned this through cornfields, dairy farms, Sunday dinners. Through wages paid fairly, food shared generously, humans treated decently. American farmers weren't trying to convert them. They were simply being American, pragmatic, fair, focused on getting work done and treating workers right. That simple approach transformed enemies into friends. That pragmatism defeated ideology. That abundance proved democracy's ultimate argument. When German POWs arrived in America, they came as believers in the Reich. When they left, many believed in America, not because America was perfect, but because America fed them, paid them, treated them like human beings. That, more than any propaganda, demonstrated which system worked. The prisoners who didn't want to leave weren't being disloyal. They were being rational. Why return to poverty when you've tasted abundance? Why accept oppression when you've experienced freedom? Why choose a system that failed when you've seen one that succeeded? These questions had obvious answers. Many prisoners spent years trying to return to America. Some succeeded, others didn't. But all carried memories of a place where being an enemy didn't mean being treated as less than human, where abundance was normal, where kindness wasn't reserved for the racially pure, where corn grew so thick you fed it to animals, where ice cream was ordinary, where even prisoners ate better than German generals. They'd seen democracy at work, and for many, it was beautiful.